All right, so you want to get us started, Irma?
Yes, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about student goal setting, and in particular for success skills. And my name is Irma Bektich. I think I've met most of you who are in this session, so I'm super happy to hear about your experiences in this area as well.
Right, and I'm Jo McKim. I think most of you know me as well. I'm another deeper learning resource teacher. And as Dr. Coleman said, I think looking at our success skills as the umbrella and how we can really motivate students and make learning an experience for them, it really is everything for us right now. So I'm excited that you're here and hopefully you'll get something useful out of it.
So the first thing we would like to touch on is our current state, right? So where do we see goal setting or reflection happening? And we know that learners are reflecting when they're uploading their artifacts. This is just kind of one example. And if you click on this, it'll take you to a very nice video from our digital learning team on how to upload artifacts. But really within that, you can see that there's an opportunity to reflect. But what we want to focus on is how might students' reflections lead them to authentic goal setting around their success skills and beyond. Another place where you might see goal setting is learners might be uploading their MAP goal setting artifacts, in particular, very often to their prepared and resilient learner success skills folder. But what we want to really try to think about is how does setting MAP growth goals really connect to being a prepared and resilient learner? So those are just two out of many cases and places where students are already engaging in some sort of reflection or goal setting. Jo, did you want to add anything here?
No, well, yes, I'll jump in just for a second because again, I know we're short on time, but I think this question around MAP scores or ACT scores we see a lot at the high school is an important one because we see students who are saying things like, I want to raise my score from 217 to 230, or I want to raise it from a 20 ACT to a 22 ACT, right? They'll say things like that. And they'll be able to say, these are all the things I did. I studied, I went to tutoring, I whatever, right? But nowhere in that conversation do they talk about how they're being more prepared or how they're being more resilient. Where did they stumble? Where did they grow? How did they become a more resilient learner than they were before they started, right? So their goal is still about the learning, not about that success skill. Right. And that's what I see in defenses all the time. I don't see kids talking about their resilience. I see them talking about their MAP achievement data. And we want them to connect that data with their resilience and their preparedness for learning. So that's kind of why that question is there. So hopefully you guys can push that with kids in your situations. We wanted to make sure you guys also had, and we're going to give you this slide deck so you'll have it. These are the links straight to our JCPS success skills performance outcomes. And hopefully you've looked at those. They're all linked in the teacher backpack as well. We have described what it looks like to be a 5th grade emerging innovator, what it looks like to be an 8th grade emerging innovator, and so on. And they do look different from 5th to 8th to 12th. However, what we haven't done is given those progressions of what does it look like K through 5 or 6 through 8 or 9 through 12. So how might we be working with our students to help them create and describe those performance outcomes? What would our students say a 3rd grade emerging innovator looks like? What would a student say a 10th grade emerging innovator looks like? And those are the goals that we need to start getting students to think about and set for themselves. How are they growing in these success skills rather than just seeing it as a one and done? I did this, one of the things I've seen a lot in defenses is I participated in band, or I participated in drama, or insert whatever group activity you want. And that shows I'm a collaborator because I was in this thing, and it wouldn't have existed if we weren't in a big group. That's not the same as those descriptors that are on our JCPS performance outcomes, where they have very specific skills that they need to be growing as they're part of that group experience, right? So again, we have them for 5, 8, and 12, but we're teaching success skills at every grade. So we should be talking amongst ourselves in our PLCs and at our schools about what that looks like at all those different grade levels.
I love the comment in the chat as well of students have to learn to own their own success skills, which happens when we make it part of our culture and talk about the skills in a natural way. I think that's a really good point, Holly.
Yes. So Paul Emmerich France, there shouldn't be an R on the end of his name. That's a typo. Paul Emmerich France wrote a book called Reclaiming Personalized Learning. And this is a quote from that book. He says, learning requires conversation. And so that means that not only are we having a conversation with students, maybe students are having conversations with each other, but what I wanted to lean into this quote about is it's really about students having an internal dialogue. What is the conversation they're having with themselves about their learning? How are they choosing and making a decision to be active in their learning and setting that goal for themselves? And that's what we want them to get to. That doesn't happen without us helping them become aware of their self-awareness, and reaching a place of acknowledging that internal dialogue and choosing to act on it, right? All right, and that's what this longer quote from the same text says, that teachers encourage students to access their agency. So we're going to want them to own it, to witness their autonomy. So not only do we want them to own that goal setting, but we want them to sort of testify, to be able to say, here's how I progressed down a path in that learning by choice, because I have that internal dialogue and agency, and that we're going to help them find their own purpose in the classrooms. Teachers also aid students in their exploration of identity. So we're talking about equity and self-awareness and sense of belonging here. And through all of that, they're going to unlock that intrinsic motivation that's going to really help them learn, more so than a letter grade or a trinket or some external or extrinsic motivation at the end. It's that, again, that inner dialogue that needs to happen, that conversation with self. Again, we talk a lot about metacognition, but are we teaching kids to have those conversations with themselves and be metacognitive in their thinking and their learning? That's the first step. So one way we do that, help them with this process, is by setting up a really linear way for students to look at it, right? So here's a goal setting process that you could use with students. First, we're going to identify strengths. Then second, identify obstacles. Then look at the causes and consequences. What causes things to happen and what are the consequences? And I want to iterate that when we talk about consequences, we're not just talking negative. Our students oftentimes think a consequence is something bad. Consequences are positive. Most often, I think they're positive. But the things kids remember are those negative consequences. I got called to the principal's office. I got, sent out of the classroom, all of those horrible things. We need them to see that consequences are results that are positive as well. And we want to talk about those. And the fourth step is, we know about the causes and consequences thus far. What are we going to do in the future? That's where we set that action step in place. So I'm going to set a goal. Maybe my MAP goal is to increase by whatever, but what is my action step? My real goal is what I'm going to do to get there. And the consequences that are going to come from that action is I'm going to increase my scores, right? So walking students through this process is crucial to helping them goal set. We're going to give you some tools now that might help you with students. Thinking maps are great. And again, this helps them become more self-aware. They can't have that internal dialogue unless we give them opportunities to start practicing that. So this is just a thinking map where we could have them list around the circle, what are their strengths, right? What are their strengths? And we could talk about a specific success skill even. Let's talk about being emerging innovators and look at those performance outcomes and then say, let's reflect for a minute. What are your strengths? Every individual student could fill this out. But then the next step is to look at, and if Irma will switch to the next slide, is to do the exact same thing and say, but what are the obstacles that keep me from getting better at that? What are the obstacles keeping me from becoming an emerging innovator? Why am I still in this space, right? And we could do the same with that prepared and resilient learner, right? If we're talking about MAP scores, what are the strengths? What are the obstacles? And how are we going to get there? But really, this is about the person. We want them to think about who they are as learners when they're using these thinking maps. So these two things are really just about self-awareness. The next step would be to think about those causes and consequences, right? So we're into step 3. What is the obstacle? Put it in the center square there. What are the causes of that obstacle on the left? And then what are the consequences of this obstacle getting in my way on the right? So having kids really think through that whole process, and this could all be, the causes and the consequences could all be internal, right? This could all be something within their own head. It doesn't have to always be external. So we just need to get them thinking about it, writing it down, and processing it. But to go from having an obstacle to having a goal, all we need to do is flip this page over, just turn it over. Right? So we're going to turn that obstacle into a goal. We're going to turn those causes of that obstacle into concrete action steps to shift away from them. And then on the flip side of that goal, we're going to identify the positive consequences of reaching that goal and sort of shift that narrative of what we think about consequences. So we go from causes of an obstacle to things I need to do. And instead of an obstacle, we're going to see that as a growth possibility instead of goal. And then we're going to see those positive outcomes from attaining doing our actions that we've set out for ourselves. And again, these are really easy tools that could be used at any grade level. I've seen kindergartners do this where they're drawing pictures in there. The teacher tells them and they just draw pictures, all the way up to even, older students who are in high school can do this and get something beneficial out of it. All right, so we're going to pause for a minute. We have 10 minutes left. We want to take a little minute to hear from you all. So what do you all think about this question? How might we build a culture of goal setting with our students? And y'all can just unmute and share, or you can put in the chat if you want, but there's a small enough group here that I think we can just talk.
Well, Holly and I were going kind of back and forth in the chat, but I mean, I also don't know that we as educators are very good at modeling this. And by modeling it, I don't necessarily mean with the kids, although that's part of it. But when we even think about our professional growth year over year, we get coaching, we get formative check-ins, but ultimately we sit in front of an evaluator who tells us where we land. We don't own that process, right? I can say, here's my evidence, and then they'll say, yeah, but here's your score. Instead, what if we said, like, here are my goals, and I'm going to defend that I met them or didn't, and here's what stood in my way, or here's what propelled me, or here's what formative moment occurred that allowed me to actually fundamentally change. We don't really own that process. We do it because we're told to do it. And I think until we have to live that, it's hard for us to also ask the kids to do it.
Excellent point.
When we did defenses and we were on the panel last year, we talked to kids and our kids really didn't understand, right? Because it hasn't become really part of our culture where we are having that natural conversation. And we've been working on that a lot in this virtual setting, but kids didn't understand. So we talked about setting actionable goals, like, okay, you told me you want to get, and they would always say, I want to get 230 on my math or whatever on the map, right? And I feel like that they weren't owning it because they didn't really understand it. So I was like, what are you going to do to get that? And trying to teach them, well, you can't just tell me you're going to study, but what you can tell me is that you're going to read 20 pages in a novel 3 times a week, right? You can tell me you're going to do that, and that's an actionable. So it's really just having that conversation and showing examples and making it a part of a class. To me, visible learning with John Hattie's work is a great way to set goals. And it's obviously it's visible learning. So it's a visible way to see progress, right? And to make adjustments. So those 2 pieces are something that I hold pretty important through this process.
All right, Irma, you want to move this on? So this is another quote that I really love, and that is that growth is a choice, right? So we get back to that notion of the internal dialogue. Growth isn't going to happen without choice. And we also want to teach our students that they are enough, right? I just recently saw our governor, Andy Beshear, reading next week I think is Read Across America Week. And he was reading I Am Enough and did a video of that for elementary students. And while we want our students to know they are enough, we are enough as adults, everyone, we are enough. but we can still grow, right? Growth is still part of our human condition. And it's important that we let students know that they own that. They have choice in whether or not they grow, and that they are enough, but growth is normal and it's part of life, even though you are enough. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you guys want to say something about that, feel free. I just thought I needed to add it here because when we're constantly pushing students to add goals, it's important to know that they own it and that it is a vulnerable place for them.
Joe, I think that the best part of this quote is the part that speaks to humility. And I think that in this time, especially this past year, we all need to extend more grace to everyone. And I think that being able to be vulnerable and, that whole idea of knowing you're not the best at what you think you're the best at is a skill we have to make sure that we model, but we also ask children to consider. And that's not something that they always consider, with just brain development stages, but I think that this is a beautiful quote, and I'm glad you shared the part about the governor. I think he is in turn modeling for all of us, and so then we can in turn do the same for our teachers and our children.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so like we presented a process for goal setting, it's also important to sometimes give students a place to go and to recognize that mistakes are part of the process. So here's a process for making brave mistakes that you may or may not want to share with students in this success skill goal setting that we're talking about. And the first one there, which is really hard, and again, even for adults, is that they have to own the mistake. We've got to own our mistakes up front, and it's okay. And we're going to have feelings about those mistakes, and we need to share them because that's how we grow. And the teachers and the adults have to model that, as many of you have commented. And we're going to ask our students to do that, to model that regulation by thinking out loud their feelings, how they made that mistake, to do that real reflective kind of process. And then they can set goals based on those mistakes again. If we don't own this as a process and as being part of what's normal, our students are always going to fear failure and fear mistakes rather than seeing them as learning opportunities. So I just wanted to add that in because I do think it follows that goal setting process in pretty much in parallel. I also thought that when we're thinking about setting our success skills, if we think about our JCPS success skills and how students are growing in each of those success skills, it might be useful to have students set daily or even weekly intentions that they can connect with their success skills. So I might put this list of intentions up on the wall in my classroom and just ask kids each day or each week, like which one of these are you going to intend to be better at or to use or be or notice even? Which of these is going to be intentional for you this week? And just let them pick one a week, a day, a week, however often. And then as they get really good at that, I'm being intentional about being authentic this week. Okay, that's great. How is your authenticity this week connecting to our success skills? How is that making you a better innovator? How is that making you a better collaborator? Right? And so now they're starting to talk about those qualities that are going to help them grow towards that goal they're setting with their success skills. So again, just a strategy that I might use, and I just wanted to share it with you all, useful or not. It's up to you and your staff, right? And then we've got 3 minutes left, so we just want to make sure we end on time and give you plenty of time to get to the next session. If Irma has not already, I know she will share this slide deck in the chat. And you have our email there, so you can reach out to us if you need anything. And we're going to stop there and give you 3 minutes to get to your next session.
I have shared the agenda for today in case you need the links to get to all of the sessions, and I have to hop off to open up one of the next sessions. So I'll see y'all later.